Well, I've finally done it. I've switched over to the dark side, or the light side, or the nerd side, whatever you want to call it. I am now the proud owner of a Unifi Home Network system, and I go on to say that my home network isn't anything too crazy, but it's certainly not normal. So before we dive into the parts that I've used, let me explain my thought process when going about upgrading my home network. So we've just moved into a new house, and one of the most awesome features about this house is that it's pre-wired with Cat 5e. Now that's great and all, but the one problem is that it terminates into one of the bedrooms. And if you've seen my previous video linked right here, you'll know that my new server rack and networking equipment is essentially stored in my garage. So that means I had one of two options: reroute all of the cables from that bedroom to the garage, or figure out some way to have both. And that's what we did. Also note that this house is a good bit bigger than my previous house, so I did need more Wi-Fi coverage. So a single access point that we were using at the old place wasn't going to cut it for this one. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the parts that I purchased and talk about why I went with each individual piece of kit. We'll start with the most expensive and probably the most important piece, and that is my main switch. We went with the Enterprise 24 PoE. This is housed in the garage in my main server rack, and it gives me 24 ports of PoE, with 12 of those being 2.5 gig and 12 being 1 gig. Another feature that I wanted it to have was 10 gig, and this has two dedicated 10 gig SFP Plus ports, and I'll explain in a second why I wanted that. So some of you may be thinking, oh, only two 10 gig ports. I thought you were a big proponent of 10 gig. Why didn't you go with a 10 gig switch? Well, mainly you don't necessarily need a lot of 10 gig for a lot of devices unless you're running some crazy edge case scenarios or you have a lot of 10 gig enabled devices in your network, which I don't really. So why did I want 10 gig SFP Plus? Well, let's talk about the next switch. I went with the Enterprise 8 PoE, and that sits in the bedroom where all the Cat 5e feeds into. I like this switch because it has 8 dedicated PoE ports, and they're all at 2.5 gigabits. And it also includes 10 gig SFP Plus. And so you can probably see where I'm going with this. My main switch in the garage has a dedicated 10 gig fiber connection to the 8-port PoE switch in the bedroom. That way, if anything from the rest of the house needs to communicate with something on my main switch, we have at least 10 gigabits of bandwidth, which should be plenty enough. Now, paired with the 8-port switch, I also went with a Flex Mini just to add some more ports. And I know they're 1 gig, but everything in the house doesn't need to be running at 2.5 gigs or even 1 gig for a lot of things. So I just wanted to add some more ports on the cheap. Now let's talk about the last switch. My last switch also sits in the garage, but this one's a 10 gig switch. Wait, didn't you just talk about how you don't really need 10 gig? Yeah, well, I'm dumb, and I wanted to include a small 10 gig switch just for my limited 10 gig devices. So we went with the Flex XG, which gives us 4 10 gig ports, and I can essentially just tie all 10 gig devices directly into that switch. Now, a cool thing about this switch is that it's powered over PoE. The only thing I don't really like about it though is that there's no 10 gig SFP Plus port to tie that back into my main switch. So essentially the uplink to my main switch is only 1 gig, which is kind of annoying, and I don't have any 10 gig RJ45 plugs on this one. So I either have to do an adapter from SFP Plus to RJ45 or just let it uplink at 1 gig, which isn't really a huge deal for now. I may address that in the future, but for right now, perfectly fine. Now let's talk about access points. I did go with 3 access points, one of them being this Wi-Fi 6 Long Range Edition, which sits essentially right here and covers really all of upstairs, which isn't big at all. It's 2 rooms, so you're probably thinking, why do you need a long range access point for that? And I don't. That's just all that was in stock, which brings me to another point of Unifi hardware, is that you may plan out exactly what you want, but sometimes you're limited by what's in stock. And in my case, some of the things I actually did want weren't in stock. So I did have to go with a more expensive long range setup, but you know what? Oh well. So that covers all of upstairs and downstairs. I have 2 in-wall access points. They are the Wi-Fi 5 AC edition because again, the Wi-Fi 6 version isn't in stock, and honestly, I've never even seen one for sale. I checked eBay and they don't even exist there, so I don't know if they just shipped out like 2 of them ever, but once they're in stock, I will probably upgrade that so that I have Wi-Fi 6 around the entire house, but for right now, Wi-Fi 5 is perfectly fine, especially with the throughput that those can handle. Woo, puberty. And now for the last piece. You're probably expecting me to bust out a Dream Machine or Dream Machine Pro, but not here. We went with the Cloud Key Plus. This is the Gen 2 version. It's the most recent version as this video has been created. And I'll explain why. So it's pretty simple, really. I'm still going with pfSense as my main firewall because honestly, I like pfSense, and I did just buy an SG4100, so I don't think I could handle that going to waste. So again, since I like it, I figured why not just keep using that as my firewall. And you do need a controller. I know you can virtualize the controller, but personally, I don't like virtualizing network hardware. I know a lot of people do it and really like it, but personally, I like dedicated hardware for anything in my network. So the job of this is essentially only to let all my Unifi devices talk to each other and let me control them from not only locally, but remotely, which is a cool feature of all of this. This connects to the internet, and no matter where I am, I can log in and control my network. So that is it. That is all the hardware. Let's talk about my experience in setting it up. Honestly, from the get-go, it was hit or miss. I plugged in all my devices, and initially my Cloud Key wasn't connecting to the internet, but that was something I had to modify within pfSense, so I'm not going to knock it to the Unifi system. Now, there was something that was a knock to the system, and that was its automatic adopting. And no, we're not talking about Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. We were talking about the fact that the Unifi system, when you plug it in, it should detect any devices on the network that are Unifi and automatically adopt them into the system. And it worked for about half of them, but especially with the Flex XG, I tried over and over to adopt it. Sometimes it wouldn't find it, sometimes it would, and then when I would try to adopt it, it just wouldn't do it. I tried updating it and no luck there. I tried factory resetting it, no luck. Turns out I had to run an update on the actual Cloud Key Plus or the Unified Network software. And that wasn't very intuitive. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy ever, but I'm also not the dumbest guy ever. I hope not. And it took me a while to get to a forum or to something that led me to update specifically the network. I think it's called Console OS. And after updating that, everything worked fine. Now I know they specify on here to adopt it, you have to be running a minimum firmware or Console OS version. But again, it wasn't super intuitive. And eventually I got to it. It took about an hour before everything was hooked all up. But after that, it seemed to work fine. So let's jump into my setup and I'll show you around now. It is very limited. I am not a Unifi expert. That's the whole point of this video. I just set this up like a week ago. So anybody with Unifi tips or cool features that you can do in Unifi system, let me know down in the comments because I am all ears with this. Okay, so you can access your Unifi network in one of 2 ways, one being with a mobile app or with the Unifi console web application. So depends on what you're trying to do. For a lot of people, the mobile app is fine, but I like to do it through a web page, so that's what we're going to look at today. So going in, I'm not going to walk through the entire setup, but once you get in, you can click on your device and it will bring up a main Unifi OS dashboard. And from here, you can kind of click around and see your setup. And there are 2 main applications within the Unified Network. There's Network and there's Protect. Now, I'm not running any of their cameras or doorbell or locks or anything, so I'm not really in the Protect ecosystem yet. Unifi, if you want to send me some stuff, I'll install it. But yeah, we're going to go into network so we can do all the cool stuff that comes with Unifi Network. So here it'll take you directly to the Unifi dashboard, and here you can see a bunch of information. I'm sure you can customize this to your liking. You can see here, we can see our Wi-Fi clients, which ones are on the 2.4 gigahertz band, which ones are on the Wi-Fi 5. And if you click on that, it'll show you all your clients and more information about them. If you want to click on one, it'll show you exactly which access point it's connected to. If it's Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 4, Wi-Fi 5, so on and so forth. Signal level, it's MIMO or MIMO. 2x2, 1x1. It's really cool information to have so easily available, because a lot of people go into Wi-Fi thinking the only thing that matters are the gigahertz and the protocol, if it's Wi-Fi 5 or Wi-Fi 6. A big thing is MIMO, 2x2, 1x1, and sometimes 4x4. That essentially will determine how much bandwidth you can push through. Now, I did a video on all this before. If you want to know more about that, go check that out. I keep pointing to the wrong side. Go check that out. There's information about how to read this and determine how fast your device is capable of running. Yeah, it's pretty cool information here. You can click on the device itself. It'll give you information about it, insights, blah, blah, blah. You know, again, I am not an expert on this. I've just dabbled around in it and got pretty much bare basics. So again, let me know about the cool features you use in here. One thing that's really cool that I like is the topology, and this will show you your layout in essentially a physical sense. So here you can see my main switch. Whoa, we zoomed. My main switch, there it is, the Enterprise 24 PoE, and that feeds in directly to some clients, obviously, as well as that switch in the bedroom. And remember, that's the Enterprise 8 PoE, and you'll see that right here. And from there, we are feeding 2 access points. Those are our in-wall access points, as well as the Flex Mini and the Cloud Key Plus. And from there, you can move on to see what's connected directly into those switches and to those access points. Really cool feature to have. And again, here's my Flex XG switch. You can see a couple of 10 gig clients plugged into that, and so on and so forth. I mean, this right here, honestly, is one of the big selling points of the unified network, especially for home users. It makes it so easy to see who is connected to what is connected to what, how your data flows from the network, from your firewall to your switch to your access point to multiple switches and so forth. Now, I know you can trace it back and create your own diagram and blah, blah, blah with other things. And I know other softwares that will do something like this, but having this baked in is just such a nice convenience feature to have. Oh my God, I need water. So we'll click through here and look at some more stuff. You can go into your unified devices. This will show you the actual hardware that's running in your system. It'll show its dedicated IP address, what its connection is at. So you can see a lot of these are just gigabit. You can see we have the 10 gig link between the 8 PoE and the 24 PoE. And then this experience, I'm not exactly sure what this experience percentage is. If somebody wants to let me know, I'm sure I could just Google it, but comments are good for the YouTube algorithm. So comment below and tell me what this experience level is. Client devices, another way of looking at your clients. Statistics, so here you can look at traffic, a whole bunch of other stuff, Wi-Fi stats. Again, we've seen this already. You can display it by week, by month. You can pick a different time span if you want. You can take out certain Wi-Fi standards. You can narrow it down by so many different things. It's crazy the amount of stuff you can look at. And from a pure visualization standpoint, it's hard pressed to find something better than this. More Wi-Fi insights, and going down here to settings, this is where you'll actually go in and get to like the meat and potatoes of your network. So I'll show you a few things that I've dabbled in, one being specific to my use case because I am running pfSense as my firewall. So some of you out there that are running a firewall from Unifi, so a Dream Machine or something, won't have to go through this step, but me personally, I will show you. So if we go into networks, you'll see our networks. So by default, that is essentially going to be your LAN network. And in my case, I don't want this to be a DHCP server. I don't want anything on my Unifi system to attempt to hand out DHCP leases. So that is all done by pfSense. So since I'm doing that, I went down into here and set this DHCP mode as DHCP relay, meaning that this LAN network or this default network essentially knows that it's not going to try to assign DHCP leases. It's going to get that from somewhere else, another DHCP server, which is my pfSense setup. So we've just gone in there, changed it, and specified which DHCP server we're looking at. So this is my DHCP server on pfSense. Set that, and we are good to go. And if we go back to networks, you saw these two other ones that I have, guest and IoT. These are VLAN networks. And if you have a Dream Machine or something, you would set those up directly in there. But again, pfSense, I have both of these set up in there. Guest, I believe, is VLAN tag 50, and IoT is VLAN tag 3. Those are created in pfSense, passed down, everything is understood through the unified network. Now, this isn't a step you'd have to go through. If you had a Dream Machine, you could just create that and it would trickle down automatically to the rest of your Unifi setup. But the extra step for me in being able to use pfSense is worth it. Going into Wi-Fi, this is really cool. I really like how they handle Wi-Fi configuration in the Unifi system. So what you can do is create Wi-Fi networks, and these essentially expose new SSIDs to your house, business, wherever you have this installed. So you can see I have quite a few here. I have a dedicated Unifi one, I have Unifi 6, I have Unifi Guest, and I have Unifi IoT. So let's walk through these and I'll explain the difference between them. So the main Unifi one is essentially all of my access points. And you can see down here, broadcasting access points, you can specifically pick which access points you want to belong to that SSID. If you have 10 access points and you only want one of them to broadcast for this SID, if you want like 5 of them, if you want all 10, you can choose exactly which ones you want. So by default, it will use this default group called all access points, which is all access points. But you can go ahead and create new groups, and I've done that. I just have one called downstairs and upstairs. I only have 3 access points, so I don't really need that many groups. And you can see you can customize it if you only want this broadcasting on 2.4 or 5. There's a bunch of settings in here, some of which I have no idea what they do. Yeah, I mean, you're free to go through and modify all the settings per SSID, which is a really cool feature to have. Now let's look at one that's slightly different. So we'll go into here in this Unifi Guest one. So if you go in here, you'll see right off the bat that the network is Guest. When you go in here, it's not using the default LAN, which would be my main network. It's using the Guest VLAN. So anything connected to this Wi-Fi network will automatically be put in that Guest VLAN, which is VLAN tag, I think, 50. And I'm making sure that only the 2 downstairs access points will broadcast to this. So if you're a guest in my house, you don't get to use the fancy Wi-Fi 6 long range. Nah, I don't want guests to feel too comfortable in my house. But yeah, I just thought that was a really cool feature, and the way it handles that, it acts as, I guess you can call it a mesh, so that if I'm connected to Unifi, it doesn't matter where in the house I am, it will pick the access point with the strongest signal and connect directly to it, which is freaking sweet. So built-in mesh within the Unifi system just makes this one of the best setups I've ever had. And I've never really had a fancy setup, so yeah, the bar was pretty low. Now, I'm not going to go through all the settings here. This video was meant to show my initial setup and configuration with the Unifi system. This isn't a deep dive into the system yet. I will have to play with it for weeks or months before I'm comfortable enough to get up in front of you guys and call myself even somewhat proficient in the Unifi system. So if you're interested in that, make sure you're subscribed, because that video will be coming at some point. But that is all I have for you today. I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, drop a like below. If you want to see more Unifi networking content, please subscribe, because yeah, we got a good bit coming, I promise. Not just Unifi either. But yeah, be sure to drop a comment down below telling me what network system you're running. And if you're a Unifi guru, let me know some of the cool features that I'm missing here and some I should really dive into. I honestly would sincerely appreciate that. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and my Patreons. You guys are freaking awesome. You guys helped pay for some of this stuff because, yeah, without you guys, my wife would be even more not happy with the amount I spent on this. But yeah, that is all I have for you today. Like, subscribe, join the Discord. That is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.